Too much technical stuff. Hearing aid out. Microphone on. Okay, I think we got it. Well, good morning. Thank you so much for being here. It's wonderful to see everyone. I'm pretty delighted to have this opportunity to speak with you in such an uplifted environment. The special shrine you see behind you was put together for a one-day compassion mantra retreat that we did yesterday. And I want to thank all of the shrine team, Julaine and Bill and Hallie and everybody for taking time out of their work week to come and put this together for us. The practice that we did went from 6:30 in the morning until about 5 o'clock yesterday. And so it was a really fun event, and I'm also appreciative to Chuck Drake and Don, who came down to help us with sound, and then Chuck came down, and he was our Dharma dad. He was our Dharma dad and made our lunch. And so he fed the 7 or 8 of us who participated. And I kind of believe that when you put energy into something, that energy stays with the place. And so the investment that we made of time yesterday, being here and reciting the compassion mantra, Om Mani Padme Hum, or Om Mani Padme Hum, depending on whether you use Sanskrit pronunciation or Tibetan. My teacher was so funny about that because he was born in Tibet, and he, of course, used Tibetan pronunciation for all of the mantras that came to us from the Indian Buddhist tradition. But in my retreat, there was a Sanskrit scholar's daughter who taught us that we needed to do things in like the King's English, which is Sanskrit, for Buddhism. Anyway, so I learned it both ways. In any case, all of those mantras, which are calling upon the compassion that's inside of all of us, we just personify it as Chenrezig, the Bodhisattva of compassion, who lived at the time of the Buddha and is mentioned in some of the Buddhist sutras, most notably the Heart Sutra. Chenrezig actually speaks the Heart Sutra, the famous words, form is emptiness, emptiness is form, there is no other form but emptiness, there is no other emptiness but form. Whether we understand these words or not, there's a great deal of, I guess you could say, like awakening behind them. And so as a result, having that kind of energy here was wonderful. And being able to do the practice for all those hours, it was wonderful. So anyway, and getting fed in the bargain, I mean, hey, what's not to love? So this shrine will remain up for a little while, and then it'll be down before, I think, next week. But I just wanted you to see it, because I think it's very beautiful. The central figure is the 1,000-armed Chenrezig, who's also depicted at the shrine's left, our right, on the side of our shrine here. And the story about Chenrezig is that when he took the Bodhisattva vow, he made the promise that he would stay behind in samsara, this world of suffering. He would stay behind in samsara and click, click, turn off the light when everybody had left. And so he was considered to be an incredibly courageous person for taking the vow to stay with us until we all become Buddhas. And the story goes that at one point he sort of lost his resolve and his body shattered, and his teacher had to put him back together, and he gave him extra hands and extra arms and hands and extra heads and so forth and so on. So the idea was so that he could be more effective in combating the suffering of the world. One of our other Dharma talk presenters, Marcus Casey, gave a Dharma talk about the 1,000-armed Chenrezig one time. And he took an excellent twist on it. He said, we, each of us, are the 1,000 arms and hands of Chenrezig. When we do something compassionate, it's like we're one of those 1,000 arms and hands. And I thought that was a brilliant way of talking about our potential to be more than what we are right now, which is, I guess you could say, what Buddhism is all about. Literature, children's literature, adult literature is full of fables of all kinds, of people who have richness and they don't know it, people who have power and they don't know it. And then suddenly some wise figure comes and say, do you know that you have power? And the person in the story always says, me? Nah. And then by the end of the fable, that person has come into their own with the power that they have and manifest something magnificent. I'm thinking Kung Fu Panda. But in any case, whatever piece of literature we're talking about, whether it's children's literature or something else, the point of the matter is that we have all of us have richness inside ourselves, and it's called Buddha nature. We all have the capacity to wake up and become a Buddha ourselves. It's not that the historical Buddha Shakyamuni had a corner on the market of Buddha nature and we didn't get any. As we all have it. And so we all have the potential to become Buddha, which is why I think Buddhism is the most, even though some of the cultures it's developed in may not quite be on page with that, it's still the most egalitarian philosophy out there because anybody can become Buddha. And so we all have the capacity for goodness within us, and so therefore we all deserve respect and have value. And I think this is important for all of us to know and hear, that all of us have something within us that gives us, that makes us deserving of respect and goodness. So in any case, it's all good. Yeah. So that was what we did yesterday. Was we sort of tried to resonate with compassion all day long and put some of extra in this space. So thanks for being here for it. We'll probably do another one of these in the fall, so watch for it. Okay, so today I would like to talk about, the topic, of course, is borrowed from the 12-step tradition, because folks who know me know that I was in Al-Anon for a number of years, and that I have a soft spot in my heart for the recovery tradition. So my dad, who was very active locally in the 12-step meeting scene, he would quote the slogans, the sort of mind training slogans of the recovery tradition. And one of them was, easy does it. In other words, don't push, don't use like self-violence. You know what I'm saying? It's like don't hurt yourself, don't throw yourself into something in such a way that you're causing yourself problems. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. Easy does it. But before I get into that, there are things that we gotta do, and so what we're going to do at the beginning here is recite the prayers of taking refuge in the Buddha as the teacher and so on, and engendering the Bodhisattva mind, dedicating this time that we're spending together to the betterment of not just ourselves, but all beings. And we'll recite it together twice in English, and then I'll sing it once in Tibetan, and if you know it, you can join in. So it starts with the words in the Buddha. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the assembly most excellent, I take refuge until I reach enlightenment. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I achieve enlightenment for the sake of all beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the assembly most excellent, I take refuge until I reach enlightenment. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I achieve enlightenment for the sake of all beings. Okay, let's try and recite this in Tibetan. O Sanje Chudan Soji Chonamla Jang Chu Pardu Dani Kyap Suchi Daji Jin Soji Be Sunam Ki Drola Penshir Sanjay Druparsho. Okay, thank you. Now I'll recite a short prayer of my own and then we'll begin. O Palden Sawelam Harimboche Tagi Chiwar Pede Den Shala Kadrin Jembo Gorneche Sunte Kursun Taging Udrup Sal Okay, thanks a lot. Okay, well, this the idea for this talk came to me while I was driving to come here for an event, and I was going over one of my favorite prayers that we actually recited yesterday during our program, and it was the praise of the 12 deeds of the Buddha Shakyamuni. And so in a way, as I've mentioned in other talks, when we've talked about what's the nature of Buddhist prayer and why do we do it and who are we talking to anyway and what's this all about, there are many types of Buddhist prayers. And some of the Buddhist prayers that we do praise the qualities of enlightened beings. And by praising the qualities of enlightened beings, we, in our own way, cultivate those same qualities and appreciate those same qualities that are within us. I know that a lot of us, I don't know about you, but I went through many periods in my life where I engaged in a lot of what I would call negative self-talk, right? Negative self-talk, where I was kind of mean to myself, and I would speak to myself harshly. Possibly because I had heard harsh speech when I was growing up and I just internalized those voices and then unfortunately made them my own. And so one of the things that I feel is necessary for us, and one of the places that Buddhist prayers helps us, is by talking about the qualities of enlightenment, which we're all capable of. You see a theme repeating here? This enlightenment that we're all capable of, talking about the qualities of that enlightenment and praising the qualities is a way for us to gradually nurture those qualities within us. Because let's face it, we're not always, we are not always angels. And we don't do things we should do. And a lot of people say, oh, I learned meditation, but it's hard to start the habit. Or, I understand that, wasting my time in these kinds of pursuits, this, that, or the other thing, is wasting my time, and I really should be meditating instead, but I just can't seem to get on the cushion, so forth and so on. So we have a lot of this negative self-talk. So the prayer replaces the negative self-talk with something positive, praising these qualities. If you look at the 12 deeds of the Buddha, I can't quote them all because there's 12. That's a lot. But I do know that they have to do with his conception, his birth, his leaving home to practice the Dharma, his seeing of the 4 sights that inspired him to leave home, his attempt to achieve enlightenment through effort, and then his adopting of a middle way, and then his attainment of enlightenment, his teaching, and then his parinirvana, or his passing away. And then even after he passed away, he was busy, because the 12th of the 12 deeds is his relics were taken from the funeral fire and put and enshrined in mounds, which now we call stupa, S-T-U-P-A, stupa. And we have one out front. It's a monument that architecturally suggests a sitting Buddha. You have to kind of like use your imagination when you look at the geometric forms of a stupa to see the Buddha, a sitting Buddha there, but it's there. So I'm going to talk about one of those deeds, and that is attempting to achieve enlightenment through effort. And this is why the title Easy Does It came to my mind. So imagine you're Prince Siddhartha. You've just taken your first full tour of your city-state because your father, for some reason, kept you inside the palace compound for your entire youth. And he was married, Prince Siddhartha was married off when he was 16, immediately produced an heir. He did his job as a prince. He ensured the continuity of the kingdom and so forth. He had already produced the heir, and so his father, King Suddhodana, had no way to argue with him. When he said, "Father, you know, I've never been outside these walls. You think it's time I toured my kingdom?" And he said, "Okay, but I'm going to send a chaperone with you to make sure you don't see anything that you're not supposed to see." The backstory to this was that when Prince Siddhartha was a baby, they did the usual thing and consulted a fortune teller about his future. And the fortune teller said, "Oh, well, this person is either going to become a great king, or they're going to run away from home and become a wandering holy man." Well, you can tell which advice the father wanted to follow. So he took the advice, which was, don't expose your son to the sufferings of the world. Pretend that suffering, aging, sickness, and death don't exist, and that everything will be fine. But then if he sees aging, sickness, and death, he's going to get a different idea and run away from home. Well, guess what? You know, Murphy's Law being true in every generation, whatever could go wrong did go wrong in this particular instance, because when young Prince Siddhartha was taken on his chariot ride around with his chaperone, it didn't work because aging, sickness, and death appeared before his eyes. And he was stunned and astonished to see the depth of suffering of his people. And the last thing he saw before he went back into the palace, he's a little shook up, you know, because he thought everybody lived like he did in a palace, right? So when he saw the poverty, the sickness, and all of the suffering, he was shaken to the core. And so as he was going back, he saw there was a man sitting under a tree quietly. And Prince Siddhartha asked the chaperone, "What's that guy doing?" And he says, "My prince, that person is trying to go beyond the suffering of the world." He thought that was a good idea. So the little light bulb went off in Prince Siddhartha's head, and he ran away from home. Surprise, right? Now, everybody people in the 20th century or the 21st century look back and say, wait a minute, that means that Prince Siddhartha was a deadbeat dad who left his son and wife and went off to pursue his quest for enlightenment or whatever. And I like to say, yes and no. Yes and no. Yes, he did leave his wife and son, but he didn't leave them on the curb, you know. He left them in a palace. The son was the heir, so the son was going to be cared for, and the mother was going to be cared for. So it wasn't as if he left them on the curb. So he gets a slight pass from modern judgment. So and of course, he was trying to do something special. He knew that he had a destiny to fulfill, so he went out to fulfill that. Well, anyway, and we tend to celebrate those stories as well. So it's a mixed bag. So what does he do? If you're a prince and you've always had the best of everything, what do you do when you want to find out the causes of suffering in the world? You go and ask all the experts. So he went and interviewed every single holy man he could get his hands on, and learned every type and every style of yoga. this type of physical and mental discipline was very popular in his day. And in fact, the different schools of yoga would debate each other as to which was the best. It was quite a thing. And so he realized that he had a lot of lost time to make up for if he was going to come to the solution of the question, why is there suffering? So he gets all his experts, he learns everything he possibly can, and then he throws himself into it like he has thrown himself into everything else in his life. Athletic competition, finding a wife, everything. He threw himself into everything. And so he throws himself into this as well. And it worked out pretty well for him in his princely life, but it didn't work out so well in his spiritual cultivation life. And so after about 6 years, he practiced the most extreme form of asceticism that was available to him, which is where you nearly starve yourself to death, waiting for illumination. And it wasn't working out so well. The riverbank was hot, and the sun beat down day after day after day. He probably was burned to a crisp. And not only that, he lost so much weight you could actually see his ribs through his chest. And believe it or not, his meditation was not going well. And so his mind was scattered, and it was kind of a mess. And the way the story of his life is told, he had an aha moment. And the aha moment came when he realized that he was trying too hard. And that's why one of the 12 deeds is him doing it the wrong way first. Because he needed to learn the lesson. Because the way that line of the prayer starts is, the prayer says, attempting to attain enlightenment through effort. He sat for 6 years on the banks of the Naranjana and practiced asceticism. Well, so what happened after that was that in his delirium, he started remembering the past, and he remembered some of his princely lessons. You know, princes got trained in all kinds of things, combat and so forth, and sword play and every possible thing, horsemanship. But he also learned how to play a stringed instrument that we might call like a lute. And he was learning to play this, and his teacher was quite strict. He said, the string cannot be too tight. It won't make the nice sound. And it can't be too low or too loose, or it'll make an unclear sound. So the string needs to be tuned right in the middle, right at that sweet spot where the string resounds. It rings with the sound. And so in his delirium, he kind of took hold of this, because he had been starving himself for how many years anyway? Like he was down to eating 1 grain of rice a day and drinking just a very little water. And he had not had any visions or illuminations. And so he kind of realized he was nearing death. So remembering this lesson, he decided to make a change in how he practiced. And he actually got up from his seat and walked away. Now, what's interesting about this is that in the years, those 6 years, he had gathered 5 disciples who sat around this silent, ascetic, holy man and said, wow, he's amazing. How many years has he been here? Oh, we've got to sit and wait for this. So they decided to practice like he did. And so they were somewhere in the middle of their path, and he had come to the dead end of his. But he got up and walked away, and of course you can imagine being those 5 people. What? He's walking away. Is he a quitter? Anyway, who knows what they thought. But he walked away, and he got something to eat. As it happens, there was a woman there who had like a rice and milk mixture. And she offered it to him, and he took it. And suddenly his body and mind started functioning in a much better way than it had. And he began to realize that he himself had been the string tightened too tight. He was being too tight about his meditation, being too tight about his ambition, his wish to accomplish something. And that wish to accomplish something was actually getting in his way. The idea that I would accomplish something was actually getting in his way. And so he had to get out of his own way. And so the way he did it was taking nourishment, getting up from his place of honor among the other ascetics, and walking away from the ascetic life, and taking nourishment. Then what did he do after that? He decided he was going to sit down again now that he was feeling refreshed and he felt his meditation could improve. He gathered together soft grass. So he had a sheaf of soft grass and he went under the shade of a tree. No more sunny riverbank for him. He was done being baked. So he got under the shade of a tree. He had been nourished. He had a soft cushion, not that hard clay. And there, he was refreshed and he was ready to meditate. Easy does it. He decided to take a softer, better way. So what he did was he made himself comfortable and stopped being so darn tight. He decided to relinquish his ambition and just look at his mind and wait to see what happened. Doesn't that sound interesting? Because I don't know how many times I've taught meditation, and virtually everyone at the very beginning has a little trouble because they want to do it really well, right? They're very conscientious and they want to do it really well. So they'll try, when they first learn to meditate, they'll try to sit for an hour. Like, I'm going to really get this. I'm going to get this. And they struggle with themselves and they're tired and something itches or they have like a bad memory that's playing back and they don't know what to do with it. And so they feel that meditation just isn't for them. But it's not the meditation isn't for them, it's just the way they approached it was a little harsh, just a little too tight. And so to really be able to relate to our mind, I mean, how many people, you don't have to show your hands, but like secretly, how many people have given themselves like a total bad self-talk? Like, you are totally a mess. You're totally wrong. Everything about you is wrong. Okay, if this has ever happened to you, I'm with you. I feel you. So we've all done this. We've all been too tight with ourselves. We've all done it. So how do we learn to let up? How do we learn to let up? Because we learn to be too tight. How do we learn to let up? Meditation is a great teacher. And this is why when we teach meditation here, there are two words you will never hear us use, and that's because I beg the meditation instructors not to use them, and that is focus or concentrate. I don't use either one of those two words on purpose because we're human beings. We take instruction very well. If you instruct us to do something, we're going to try to do that thing, especially if we're motivated to learn what you're trying to teach. So if people say focus, we do it. If people say concentrate, we do it. And that tightness doesn't really do what it's supposed to do because what we are trying to work with is something so subtle that we have probably in our entire lives never seen it before, which is our mind without any thoughts in it. It's very subtle, the mind without any thought in it. Most of us think of it as being like an idle, blankness. But it's actually quite dynamic. But we'll never see it if we don't have a little discipline. So again, not too tight, not too loose. you have to apply yourself to meditation just right. So when people come to me and say, my neck hurts when I meditate, or if they say to me, like, my mind is so wild, I can't do anything with it, I say, I get that. That's a thing that can happen. And here are some things you can do about it. If people are too tight and they're getting pain, I encourage them to relax. Maybe even lie down to meditate once or twice, just to see if that helps their body. And if their mind is really, really wild and they can't settle down, I say to them, could you try something? Could you try to, when you first sit down, just like feel your body on the floor, feel your situation, feel the space around you, and then take one deep breath, breathe out, and then just be aware of the movement of the breath coming in and going out. Don't be too tight about it. You will notice if you wander from it. And then when you wander, be really gentle with yourself. And if you wander, because you're going to, because mind is very subtle and it moves very quickly. So when we place our attention on the breath, it'll stay there. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. And then suddenly something will happen and we'll remember something from yesterday, or we'll think about something tomorrow, and then our attention will wander. That's okay, because it's part of how the mind works. Our job is to observe and report. So we observe the mind doing this, and then we take hold of our attention. In fact, you can even label it thinking, and then let it go, and then gently, 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 gently return your attention to the breath, and think of it as a fresh start. Not like bad meditator. You know, you're not going to get this. No, you can't do that. That self-talk is not allowed. Instead, you say, I'm coming back. I'm just coming back. No baggage. I'm just coming back. And then you'll place your attention on the breath again. 1 second, 2 seconds. Maybe you get to 10 this time. Who knows? 1 breath, 2 breaths, 3 breaths. Then you're off again. And that's okay, because it's all part of the training. Notice it, label it, and come back. Gently, gently, gently. So I said to myself, this is today's meditation talk topic. Easy does it. And there's a reason that I wanted to teach on this particularly, because our Buddhist center is part of a 1,000-year-old Buddhist tradition called the Mahamudra tradition. Mahamudra meditation started in India 1,000 years ago with the Indian saint Tilopa, and then it went to Tibet in the, I'm going to say like the 1000s or the 1100s with Marpa, a Tibetan translator who went to India and met Tilopa's student Naropa. And the highest teachings of this tradition have always been passed down from teacher to disciple in spoken words. Spoken words, person to person. And part of the instruction is to be able to allow your mind to be relaxed. So how are we going to allow our mind to be relaxed if we're always doing the opposite? So this is why when I teach meditation, I don't use the word focus and I don't use the word concentrate, and I do say be gentle when you return. Be gentle with yourself when you return, because that gentleness is actually your relaxation at work. You're training yourself to not be non-reactive, not immediately reaching for the self-violence when something goes wrong. Just keep coming back gently, gently, and that affects who we think we are, it affects who we become. So that was one of the things I wanted to talk about and impart today, was that idea of gentleness. Because one of the 12 deeds of the Buddha was this attempt to learn and to gain enlightenment through effort. And the effort was too hard, was too much. And he almost died from it. But when he moderated his approach, just enough tension and just enough looseness, then it was successful. So that's something that we can take and learn from. I feel like that's, how do we put that in our life? How do we make that part of our life? One is to be aware of our thinking, which does happen when you practice meditation. You become aware of your everyday thoughts. You become aware of your thoughts while you're meditating, and you become aware of your thoughts in your everyday life. In fact, some people say, I never knew I was thinking half this stuff before. We're swallowed in the stories that we tell ourselves about our lives. We're swallowed by those stories. We're either the hero or we're the villain in our own story. And we make these stories one thought at a time. And so when we're in meditation and we're watching our object, whether it's the breath or a visual object or whatever, and when we're watching that object and a thought comes up, if the thought just disappears, if we don't grab that thought and do something with it, it actually just vanishes. Where did it go? Where did it go? It went back into the ocean of our mind. It was just a wave. And this was the analogy the Buddha himself used to describe the mind. It was vast and deep like an ocean, and thoughts, feelings, and emotions were like the waves. Now, most of us just spend our lives surfing. We never experience the mind in its depth. We never get that far. But if we can get there, then we have a chance to come to a realization, the exact same realization that the Buddha came to, and the exact same realization that all of the masters of Mahamudra have come to over the centuries. And this is how it's done. It's done by allowing the mind to come to rest and reestablishing rest when we wander. That's it. It's incredibly simple. But because we think it has to be hard, we think it has to be difficult, we make it harder than it is. And so this is why we have a whole group of meditation instructors. Anybody who has visited our Intro to Meditation class has met one of them. And so, in fact, we have a couple in the room right now. There's Paul, and let's see who else is instructor here. Marilyn, okay. So yeah, and so we've got, plus we have lots of people who are trained and can do this practice. And so as a result, you have lots of people you can ask for advice if your meditation isn't going well. You can ask me, you can ask Lama Tom, we're here for you. And we're here to assist with what you need. We have something actually that we call the Mentorship and Meditation Program. Right now we don't have a lot of openings, but you can always sign up and get on the wait list, and then it's 4 meetings with a meditation teacher to go over your meditation and ask questions. So it's like that. So the things you can do is just remember to be gentle. Remember to be, when you're aware of your thoughts, don't beat yourself up. There's other things you can do instead. In fact, my teacher, Kempo Karthar Rinpoche, said sometimes when we make a mistake, out of ignorance, we're just ignorant about something we don't know. Not knowing, we do things wrong and we make mistakes. And he said, instead of giving yourself a hard time, why don't you think about all of the beings in the world and realize every single one of them has made a mistake. When we're very tunnel visioned with our own story, we can't think like that. But when we begin to open that up, we begin to realize, all those people who are sitting in meditation with me, they all have stories too. And they're suffering in one way or another. So we've all made mistakes. May my mistake help to purify all of us of mistakes. By my accepting this mistake, may all of us be free of mistakes. It's a very simple two-step process. You experience that feeling of beating up on yourself, and then you call a timeout. Say, wait a minute, Lama Kathy said I don't have to do this. I can actually do something different. And the different thing that we choose to do is to universalize and think about all beings and think everybody has made mistakes. So may I and may they be free of mistakes in the future. May I and they practice well in the future, and so forth. And you have people you can ask for help and advice here. We're here for that. And you can recite prayers like the praise of the 12 deeds of the Buddha, which is really a teaching masquerading as a prayer. Because this is how people learn Buddhist history, by reciting the story of the Buddha in 12 parts. When you recite the 12 deeds of the Buddha, you're gradually putting into yourself the story that you will someday live. I read an essay once by a Tibetan scholar, and he said, I think all of us are going to live the life of the Buddha. All of us, at some point in time, will live the life of the Buddha. All of us will be born into some form of privilege, some form of privilege. All of us will find dissatisfaction with worldly success. And all of us will seek, as he sought, something that is beyond worldly success. And we will go through hardships as we try to seek that, but we will eventually find it. So anyway, I encourage that as well. Before I stop for questions, I thought, as we were saying aspiration prayers yesterday, I found an interesting one. There's a prayer we recite called the King or the Monarch of Aspirations. And I love this one line: with gentleness may I exert myself in the training. With gentleness may I exert myself. Gentle, I love that. A little exertion, a little gentleness. It's like the string, right? Not too tight, not too loose. And the explanation from Khenpo Sultram Jamso said, this is an aspiration to abide in the qualities of the compassionate family, to be of a gentle or tranquil dispositions. Although there are many explanations of the qualities of this Mahayana family, and Mahayana means like the broad path of love and compassion, the main one that appears in all of the texts is to have a gentle disposition endowed with love and kindness. Then the line says, may I exert myself in order to know what I do not know about the conduct of the 6 perfect virtues: generosity, ethics, patience, and so on. In order for this knowledge not to become impaired and in order for it to continuously increase, may I abide in this gentle family and train in its conduct. So when I read that yesterday, I said, ooh, this is perfect to end the talk with. With gentleness, may I exert myself in the training. Okay, so I talked a bunch. And hopefully there was a through line there. Starting with the title, Easy Does It, talking about the life of the Buddha, talking about his exertion that kind of was going in the wrong direction, how he redirected himself with gentleness and accomplished Buddhahood, that state of knowing one's mind completely, which can only be arrived at with gentle exertion. I talked a little bit about the most, what's the right word? Subtle forms of meditation in the Mahamudra and how that becomes open to us when we learn this basic skill to be gentle with ourselves. So I think that's what my topic is today. And now is discussion. We have maybe 10 minutes. We can have a discussion. Question mics over here and over here are open for comment. Yes, sir.
Well, hello. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to be here too.
Thank you, Lama Kathy.
Yeah.
So Americans like to say no pain, no gain. Big saying.
Yep.
Yeah, so
We are the land of the rugged individual.
So-
I remember that.
okay, so you've kind of covered this, but it still came into my head. So how do Buddhists reframe that? Because there, as you were saying, there's some effort involved. Also, even though we like to say Buddhism is at some level easy, anybody who studied Buddhism knows it's complicated. There's a list, 4 of these, 8
Yeah, I
of these,
know,
12
right,
of those, and 1,000 lists. Anyway, so if to somebody who says no gain, no pain, no gain,
Yeah,
what
right.
is
Yeah.
what does the Lama
What
say?
does that look like? Yeah. I first of all, I love it. You know, I got to say, I love this question because it really does speak to who we are as a group of people. You know, people come to America to participate in what's this amazing experiment that's been going on for almost 250 years, and we still haven't figured it out. I don't think we've done it right yet, but it's okay. You know, it's like we're doing our best. I think this is how it looks. I think it looks like consistency with practice, trying to be consistent with practice. And I know that it can become a self-defeating exercise, you know, because I mean, you know, if you've got these watches that tell you if you have like made your exercise goal for a week, you get a little prize. I mean, it's silly, right? They've gamified everything, right, in order to encourage us to do the things we're supposed to do. Well, you can also set them up to remind you to be mindful. And so what I tell people to do is if you have the ability to, you know, like remind yourself to be mindful at least once a day, try and do that. But failing that, when you wake up in the morning, before you, even if you need to get your coffee first, go get your coffee first, and then come and sit down for a minute and just be with yourself for 5 minutes. And even if you struggle with meditation, just be with your breath for 5 minutes. And my friend, Dr. Julie, the brain scientist, when she was here for the COSI Science Festival, and we did mindfulness and science talks for COSI, she said that really, even just 5 minutes of mindfulness in a day can actually make brain changes that are beneficial. So I'd say consistency is really more important. So when you first get up, even if you do it before you get out of bed, just sit and watch your breath for just a few minutes. And make sure you do it every day so that your daily practice is so small you can't not do it. You know what I'm saying? To use a double negative. You can't fail to do it because it's so short and so easy. And I feel like, and my teacher, Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche, said that consistency was the most important thing. Because if you try to sit for really long periods of time, infrequently, he said, that doesn't do you half as much good as just doing a little meditation every day and every day and every day and every day. Because we're creatures of habit. Humans, we do everything. We learn everything through habit. And so if we can develop some habits that are more beneficial for us, that's important. So I think what the effort looks like, the effortfulness would be the effort to be consistent and the effort to be kind to oneself and see our spiritual practice, our meditation practice as a form of self-care. Because we don't always take care of ourselves, but if we can at least do a little bit of that, I think that's good. And then when we're not meditating, just to allow the mind to rest sometimes. Watching the trees sway in the wind or going to a lake and just watching the ripples go by, you know. Doing something that's just quiet activity. So it's like that, So does that work for effort? Okay, awesome. Yes, hi.
Good morning.
Good morning.
One of the things that I've been doing myself is when I find myself regretting something or having some anxiety about something, I go, I recognize that I'm doing that, and I can get back to the task at hand. It's like it's a positive thing that I've recognized.
Yeah.
So the other thing I wanted to mention is Deepak Chopra has a little book called The 7 Spiritual Laws for Success. And one of them is the law of least effort. And it just, I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. No, I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. Did you have another thing, or was that? Okay. I thought I saw, yeah, okay, never mind.
I thought you might have something more to say, but
Oh,
Deepak
yes.
Chopra not being a Tibetan, I guess, probably limits
hey,
that.
it's okay. I'm going to make a joke and say it's another one of those 4 things to remember, Paul. So, I mean, anyhow, I'm just joking. I'm joking that all of the great teachers come up with lists of things. Anyway, the joke is lost. Oh, my joke is lost. But, I can say a couple more things about that. And I think that that's how we make any kind of change, isn't it? By making a decision that we're going to make that change. And then meditating every day, even if all we do is this 5 minutes of meditation a day, when we let go of a single thought in meditation, that's a powerful thing. That's actually, for me, and Dr. Julie agrees, so I feel like it's bolstered by science. Is that the moment we label that thought thinking and let it go, we've done a really powerful thing there. We made a decision about what we're going to think and what we're going to do. Isn't that interesting, right?
Well, I was thinking, in addition to on the cushion, off the cushion, the other 23 hours and how many minutes of the day.
Exactly. And it bleeds over, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because because when you let go of a single thought in meditation, you've just strengthened the muscle, if you want to call it like that, of mindfulness and letting go.
People talk about being in the zone, when they're doing something.
Yeah.
And that's focused completely on the task at hand.
I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. Oh, now I'm going to start thinking about funny lessons you learned from your parents. Okay, this is totally random because maybe it has nothing to do with what you're talking about. But I just flashed on something my father-in-law used to say. My father-in-law was a Finnish carpenter, F-I-N-I-S-H, not 2 N's. Anyhow, he was from Czechoslovakia. But anyway, he was a Finnish carpenter, which means he makes all the fine furniture and the moldings and stuff like that. And they always say, what is it? Measure twice, cut once, right? So, but one of the things he used to say, thank you, Frank, was if you don't take the time to do it right, when are you going to find the time to do it over? And it's like, oh man, that may be a little harsh, but it's like easy. Take your time, do it right. So anyhow, thanks for sharing that. Yeah, hello, sir.
Hello. I want to ask about. I've recently been reading about the 4 thoughts that turn the mind to Dharma, and the first one, of course, is precious human birth. The second one is impermanence, and in the context of that teaching, I feel like the lesson is to have some sort of urgency in that this human birth is so rare and we're so impermanent that you should practice right now.
Right.
And I wonder how you balance sort of that teaching with the idea of easy does it.
Yeah, I think, I understand what you're saying. There's a quote that's on my refrigerator that speaks to the, refrigerator. One of these days we should do a whole thing on refrigerator quotes and stuff. Because everybody has this portable artwork in your house. I think everybody has one. And it's like Milarepa, the great saint who spent 12 years in caves. I mean, talk about strenuousness. They said, why can't you be like your teacher? He's married, he has kids, he's got a house, he's living well off the land. Why can't you be like him? And he said, because I'm not him. If I had all of his stuff, I would be lost in distraction. I need to be in a cave because it's the only way this kid's going to get tamed, meaning himself. Anyway, so that's a little story. So he said, do not be impatient to gain enlightenment, but practice until your last breath. So in other words, hasten slowly. So I think that there's a balance to everything. And I think that you're right. We are told on the one hand that this life is very precious and that it's very fleeting. And so I think that it depends on our temperament and our history as to how much effort we can put into it before it becomes counterproductive. I like to say that every human being has their own personal style of confusion. I don't know if you've noticed this. We all have our own personal style of confusion. Mine is different from theirs, is different from theirs. And like, these are unhelpful things we do that we can't stop doing. And then we bring those unhelpful attitudes into our Dharma practice, and they won't work for us in Dharma, just like they don't work for us in our everyday life. I'm a perfectionist, and so like I'm always like trying to make something perfect, and I'm letting perfection be the enemy of something that is good. So for me, that's something I have to watch out for. So I need, for myself, I need the part of the lesson that is like exertion, right? But I can't exert too much, because when I exert too much, then it blows back at me. And so at first it's trial and error. I pushed myself too hard, and then I had a reaction, and then I knew to approach more gently. So we can do both of those things. Don't be impatient to attain enlightenment, but practice until your last breath. So it's more about it becoming, your practice becoming more part of the fabric of your everyday thinking. You know, it's not necessarily working harder, it could be working smarter, in that you are trying to, instead of like force yourself into enlightenment, how did the prayer say? In attempting to attain enlightenment through effort, you know. And it's like that. Instead of doing that, try to make it pervade, the Dharma pervade your life in lots of helpful ways. Like Khenpo Karthar told me to always think like, may I benefit beings with everything I think, everything I say, and everything I do. Well, you can't think of that 24/7, you couldn't function. But every now and then, I would remember, you know, there are beings suffering and I want to help them. And like, may my presence in somebody's life be a cause of joy for them, and so forth and so on. Just these small ways that this Dharma thinking can infiltrate our everyday thinking. And I think that if we can do that, then we will get the extra effort, but it won't be effortful. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Oh, I appreciate that question. Okay, this will be the last question for today. Thank you. Yeah, you can move that down. Yeah, there you go.
Choice about being 5'3". I had an observation or a thought when I was listening to you about Easy Does It. My father actually was part of a 12-step program, so I know a lot about the practice. And you were talking about being gentle to oneself, and in my mind, I thought about taking walks with small children. Mm-hmm. If you ever take a small walk with a 3-year-old, you're stopping every 15 seconds looking at rocks, bugs, and the puppy across the street.
Absolutely.
And I realized that in that particular moment, you're not going anywhere. You're just taking a walk with your toddler.
Right.
And I think in meditation practice, we need to think like a toddler. We need to be able to take a step back and enjoy and notice these little things.
Right.
You're still meditating, you're still moving down the sidewalk to the park to play on the swings.
Correct.
But you've got to pick up the snail shell that is sitting on the ground. I mean,
it's
to.
there, right? Yeah.
Right. And I think when you're talking about being gentle to oneself, I am imagining the walk with the toddler, because as soon as you take their hand and they say, we got to get going, we have 15 minutes before we have to get back home to pick up your brother, screaming all the way down. I immediately realized that a meditation practice should be taking the time to notice the flowers, the doggies, and the snail shell on the ground.
Yeah, I really appreciate your saying this, because I do think that's what it is. And you know, pop psychology aside, I do like the quotation from Ted Lasso, be curious, not be curious, not judgmental, okay? Be curious, not judgmental. And so that curiosity carries over in what you're saying. I mean, you know, you're getting that across, right? And I think it's like being with what is. Being with what is. And I remember something that one of my favorite teachers from KTD, our home monastery in Woodstock, is Lama Lodro Lamo. She's currently the president of KTD Monastery, and she's amazing. But when she was here at the old building one time giving a teaching, she said, patience is not putting up with something. Patience is being open to how other people are.
That's really interesting, actually.
It is, isn't it? Because it reminds me of the walk with the toddler. You just got to be present for what is.
You'll get to the destination, and I think that's the most important, well, not the most important part. The destination is not the most important part, but it's the reassurance that the goal is still there. You're going to go to the swings. You're going to have your 5 minutes or your 15 minutes of stillness.
Right.
But I think it's okay to let your mind wander, to smell the roses, and think about what you're going to be making for dinner, and that the fact that you need to clean the cat boxes. That's fine. And it took me a while to do that because I have been much like the Buddha, tightening my strings so tight that they snap, and then I give up.
Right.
And hearing Be Gentle made me think of the times that I'm just taking a walk with the neighbor's toddler and just letting them wander a little bit. And you will find things about yourself when you allow you're allowed to go swimming in that ocean.
I really appreciate you saying that today. So thank you very much for bringing that today. That's great. I tell you what, this is why I like doing this job. You know, can you imagine? Of course, I don't mean to like sound negative, but you know, can you imagine what it would have been like when we were kids going to church if the pastor would have taken questions? Isn't that interesting? You know, I've challenged a couple of my friends. You know that I mean, as long as they're not trying to, to show how much they know about the Bible and stuff, as long as they're not doing that kind of thing, you know, I think this is wonderful because I get so much from what people bring to the question mic, and I really, really appreciate this because it helps to build what we've got here. And what we've got here is this collaboration and learning Dharma together. And I really appreciate you all being here for it. Well, and we'll have to stop here for today. But I'm really hopeful that a little bit of that easy does it goes with you today as you go out the door, and that you'll come back again because we'll be here. We'll be here next week, actually. So, so in any case, there's a very Buddhist thing we do at the end, and that is we dedicate the goodness of our session today. And we'll just, because of time is brief, we'll just do this in English. We'll start with the words, by this merit. By this merit, may all attain omniscience. May it defeat the enemy, wrongdoing, from the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. From the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. The courageous Manjushri, who knows everything as it is, Samantabhadra, who also knows in the same way, and all the bodhisattvas, that I may follow in their path, I completely dedicate all this virtue. Thanks, everyone. Okay, appreciate it, and thank you. Be safe out there, and we will see you next time. Thank you to the friends that are joining us on live, and thank you, Don. Thank you, Mr. Soundman.